I don't stand side by side with nobody till I bleed with them first.
What did we just see? You probably think this world is a dream come true.
When I step into this ring, yeah, bro, I am addicted.
Don't sleep on Luca!
Maybe tomorrow we'll all wear 42.
If you fight for your dreams will fight for you!
Alright, so before we get into the video, let's address the elephant in the room. Last discography review, I said Sublime was next, and this is clearly not Sublime. Well, like I was saying in the Cherry Bullet discography review, I am way behind on uploading the discography reviews, and I'm trying to catch up and get them all up soon so I can get back to other type of content. But I'm coming to you now in the present for a special reason. My dad has been the most supportive person when it comes to this channel, so I thought for Father's Day, it would only be right to interrupt our backlog of uploads to do a discography review of our favorite musical act of all time. So getting right into it, Linkin Park is a 6-member rock band that emerged at the start of the 2000s. Linkin Park is a group that has been there for my entire life, from the moment I was born until now. They have been present in my playlist year in, year out, and that was all due to my dad introducing me to Hybrid Theory is Linkin Park's debut record, released in 2000, coming in at 12 songs, 38 minutes. From the very first time my father heard this record, he was hooked. And let me just get this out the way now so everybody can save their comments about bias and whatsoever. I consider Hybrid Theory to be the perfect album. I consider Hybrid Theory to be my favorite album of all time. I consider it to be the best album of all time. There's no point in saying it, but look at the key word there. I. So don't try and argue. Don't try and start naming different albums, because it's my personal opinion pertaining to my personal taste. There's just something different about this album though. As I told my dad, it just never gets old and somehow always sounds fresh. As my dad puts it, it's an album that you try and tell yourself you'll only listen to one song, or that maybe you'll stop once you get to a song that you don't really like, but you end up listening to the whole thing. Getting into the record, I'll try and keep things short for the sake of time, but it might be impossible for me to not go on and on about each song. We start the record off with Paper Cut. Paper Cut is a perfect song and starter for this album. It introduces you to Linkin Park and their sound immediately. You're going to get Mike rapping, Chester singing his soul out, Rob providing the perfect drumming to match, with Dave and Brad giving you infectious guitar and bass lines, and then Joe Hahn throwing it down on the turntables. The song itself touches on the topic of paranoia, as they put it, how it just sits beneath your skin, causing discomfort in the littlest of ways. I also like the sort of way that they give, the paranoia its own type of being in this song. It's meant to act as the worst version of yourself. One Step Closer, the song that almost got my dad in trouble with my mom because my brother would not stop repeating the chorus. Just a song full of anger and energy. I find it hard to kind of truly write about it because I just don't know how to put the years of enjoyment and memories into words, but it's just a song that goes hard, was an anthem for all the mistreated people who were pushed around for far too long. Moving on, we have With You, which is one of the first songs that I think you truly get to see how unique and gifted Chester was as a singer. The way he sings on this song is amazing to me, and it's, the way he chooses to attack certain parts with different enunciation focus. The part that I love the most especially is the ending part. After that, we get Points of Authority. What a song, man. I'm sorry if it just seems like I'm gushing over every song, but how can you not? I love the vocal effects used on Mike and Chester in certain parts to kind of sound staticky and echoey. Mike's rap is amazing, and I like how the whole song can just be interpreted in many different ways. Also, it's technically the version from the reanimated record, but you should check out the video. It was done by Han himself. When they were talking about, Joe's process with making this music video, Brad described it as anime meets Star Wars meets Final Fantasy. And then Mike described it by saying, the video is another scary concoction from Joe's demented mind. I think if someone psychoanalyzed the videos, they would probably find out some crazy stuff about that guy. And then hilariously enough, all Joe had to say about it was, the main thing you'll grasp out of it is that the robots are just beating the crap out of each other. Moving on though to our next song, Crawling. One of the most emotional songs from the album and Linkin Park as a whole. First off, the piano at the start to be this sort of soft open, only to then immediately be met with a blast of everything afterwards. I mentioned Chester being such a unique vocalist. I think everyone will always point to this song as the best example. It's just the emotion in his voice. It pierces you, whether it's his soft, somber vocals or him just screaming out the sheer pain on the chorus. Like I said, it's one of their most emotional songs, and if you've never seen it, the live performances of this song are always just so amazing as well. Moving forward, Runaway is another song that kind of demonstrates that emotional singing of Chester. At times it's almost like his voice is quivering, like he's struggling to get the words out. However, on the bridge he has no hesitation to let that anger out. Also, it can often go unnoticed, but really listen to Rob's drumming on this one. Some of the best I've ever heard. While on the topic of anger though, let's talk about By Myself. I love the contrast with Mike's rap being sort of quiet, having these like echoey vocal effects again. And then you just compare that to the roughness of Chester's vocals and the instrumentation on the chorus as well. The song sort of touches on the same notes of, Paper Cut. It's about self-confidence and sometimes drug issues. It really tells this story of like struggling to trust oneself, especially when your mind acts as your worst enemy, feeding you lies. We then get to Linkin Park's most famous record to date, In the End. You got the iconic piano opening. One thing that goes unnoticed though is the little sort of like backing instrumentals during the rap part. I've seen some people say it's like a distorted like sort of drum sample. Don't know what it is for sure, but I really enjoyed what Joe did there, and though it's faintly heard in the background, I really enjoy what it adds to the instrumental. Going forward though, I mean, what is there more to say about this song? Every single member was just perfect. There's a reason the song blew up. It was amazing, from the rap to the vocals, the guitar, drums, everything just came together to create a generational song that would skyrocket Linkin Park to new heights. A Place for My Head is a song that is very different stylistically from other tracks, whether it is the guitar, Mike's rapping, or Chester singing. It is the one song that always stands apart from the rest for me. I love the sort of build up to the chorus each time, and also the ending part is just the best. There isn't a single time that I don't do the build up and scream each time. Our next song is Forgotten, and it shocks me to see that this is, the song that has the second to last, amount of streams on the album when you look at Spotify. Mike absolutely runs this track for all its money. It is all energy from the start, but I just love how, Mike's rap parts are very different, a bit calmer before getting back into the hard-hitting rock. Also, random niche memory time again. Does anyone else remember seeing a Dragon Ball animated music video with this song during the MySpace days? I know when my brother and dad are going to listen to this, they're going to be completely thrown off by that, especially me remembering something like that. But come on, I can't be the only one, I can't be the only one to remember this. I know I'm not making it up. I can remember it as clear as day. And a matter of fact, when I was doing all this, I even went to look it up and I found it. It was a music video about Trunks. I just remembered everything so clearly and ended up finding it. I'll leave the link in the description so you don't think I'm crazy, but that was just a random niche memory I always have with this song. But moving on though, we get to Cure for the Itch, a purely instrumental song. So you're probably thinking back to what my dad said at the beginning about, going until you find a song to stop at, and you're probably thinking, oh, it's just an instrumental. This is probably the song you'll stop at, right?
Wrong.
I mentioned Johan being the DJ of this band, and this is where you get to see how much of a master he is at this. The fact that he switches it up so many times and yet it sounds like one coherent beat is just amazing. This never gets skipped in our car, and if you skip it, shame on you. Finally, we close the whole record with the song Pushing Me Away. And honestly, I know I flip-flop around a lot, especially, and I mean, it's Linkin Park, how can you not? But I personally think this is probably my favorite song from Linkin Park. It is The song that I just relate to the lyrics the most about, you know, the line that hits me the hardest is always the sacrifice of hiding in a lie. This, you know, always hits hard, mainly due to the elephant in the room that we haven't addressed with this video, and that is the fact that Chester Bennington sadly took his life in 2017, and that was a day I will never forget. I will never forget the reactions and just being so heartbroken by it. But I bring it up now because of that one line. I remember when they interviewed Jay-Z about it, and he talked about how difficult it must be to perform in front of giant crowds and having to mask your true emotions. He even mentioned, you know, that some might often hide their pain from their own family as well. It is a line that just hits all too different. You ask why I think Hybrid Theory is my favorite album of all time. It's because of the connection. The ability to speak for so many, to have the strength to speak on things that people themselves are too afraid to say or admit to. And this song specifically, like I said, always hits so close to home. Many are making sacrifices that you don't know about. Many are suffering in silence, sometimes in plain sight. And I understand that it may be difficult, especially if it's your first time encountering it. But just be kind, because you never know what somebody is going through, especially behind closed doors and in the depths of their own mind. You know, this is obviously a Father's Day video for my dad, but also it's Men's Mental Health Month. So to every guy out there that is just trying to power through each day, you are strong and you are seen, man. Keep pushing through, even when it seems like there's no light at the end of that tunnel. Moving forward though, we got Meteora, which is the follow-up record released 3 years later, coming in at 13 songs, 37 minutes. Meteora starts hot with Don't Stay. One of my favorite bits of guitar and drum work from Linkin Park. The last part especially is just that sort of perfect chaos of those drums paired with Chester screaming. Our next song though is one that I probably would put right behind Pushing Me Away as my favorite Linkin Park song. Somewhere I Belong is a song that is just about that, seeking a place to belong, desperately searching for a place where you feel you fit in. The pure emotion of it all is great. It's a perfectly crafted song. Lying From You is like a place for my head, as it is very unique stylistically. You got Han again doing an amazing job of just including these tiny bits that make the instrumental better. I like the little back and forth between Mike and Chester as well. Moving forward though, we have Hit the Floor. Again, it's very different from previous tracks. One underrated aspect of Linkin Park is how well they set the tone. They're able to perfectly pair their vocals and instrumental work to really paint the setting for each song. For example, the whispers on this song work really well to sort of match that tone. Easier to Run is another song that is a bit different. It plays out similarly to like maybe Crawling. It incorporates more of a dragged out style of singing. It's a bit slower in pace. I still enjoy the song, but I can admit that it's the one song that I don't go back to as often as other tracks on this record. Faint is an immediate shot of adrenaline after Easier to Run. I don't know if it's a violin or like a synth kit, but its inclusion in the background is amazing. Mike's rapping and Chester screaming in the ending parts are just amazing. And then we get Figure 09, which is just like Faint. I literally have no words for this song. I just feel like such a fanboy not being able to really articulate my thoughts, but it's just, this song gets you moving. It's real high energy. And if you're a wrestling fan, I don't know if you know him, but if you haven't seen already, go check out the edit Tigerstylepro did with this song. I'll leave the link in the description. It's an amazing edit and use of this song. But moving forward, we got Breaking the Habit, which is a legendary song from this record. First off, you know, amazing song like I said, but Chester's vocals on this one, especially, you know, in the verses where he's more soft or like just really good, you know, but then you pair that with the music video. I keep telling you guys to check out so many different things, but you gotta trust me, man. The music videos they've done for a lot of these different tracks are really good, and really enjoyed the one for this one. But back on the topic of, you know, softer vocals, we see similar vocals with both Mike and Chester on From the Inside. This, like other songs, kind of builds up to that stronger, heavier chorus. We also get Chester's signature vocals full of anger on the bridge. Also, I love how the song sort of touches on like the aftermath of opening yourself up to the wrong person. Nobody's Listening is a song that features the unique inclusion of a Japanese bamboo flute. Again, it's those little things that just improve a song. And lyrically, it's one of my favorite Linkin Park tracks. I just love the decision, especially to use harsher vocals on the chorus to really match the vibe of the track. You have Chester literally yelling his heart out to the point where you can start like hearing that sort of like raspiness in his voice from all the yelling. And it's all done to, you know, get that point across of like, this is their final attempt to try and get the person to listen, you know. Moving forward though, y'all ready for Cure for the Itch Part 2? Well, not exactly, but we get an instrumental break with Session. This song actually this song was actually started by Mike, who later, you know, finished it due to the help of Joe, Brad, and Dave. Just like Cure, it's a sort of, you know, break, but it still goes very hard. Really love this instrumental. But finally, we close off Meteora with one of LP's biggest hits and my dad's favorite song, Numb. People can say all they want about the song, but it is still one of their best and most emotional songs. I mean, how can you not just love and feel all the emotion when the song starts reaching its climax, you know? And you have Chester screaming, "But I know you were just like me," with someone disappointed in you. The way I like to look at this song at times is almost like through the lens of generational trauma. It is so easy to repeat the mistakes of previous generations, to easily get angry and take that anger out on others. It's so easy to get frustrated and voice those frustrations without thinking about the weight those words hold. But also remember that, you know, like Chester says, you may have very well been on the other side of that coin, having somebody treat you that way. Think about how it made you feel. Think about, you know, how it made you want what, you know, they're describing in the song about, you know, someone was making you feel that way and you just wanted them to see that like they're only repeating the process, you know. Rather than continue that pattern, learn to be patient and understanding that, you know, the way you wanted someone to treat you back then is how you should approach and treat certain people as well. Minutes to Midnight is Linkin Park's third album, released in 2007, coming in at 12 songs, 43 minutes. Given Up is a track that always surprises me, not because Linkin Park doesn't have tracks like this, but because we've never, you know, at least in my opinion, even with a lot of the screaming that he does on Hybrid Theory and Meteora, I don't think we've seen Chester really test his vocals as much as he does on this track. I mean, especially that part at the end, it's like really crazy the way he tests and strains those vocals a lot. We then get a sudden shift to Leave Out All the Rest, which is always kind of confusing to me. You start with such, you know, high energy, and then you just shift to a more mellow, emotional track. Shift aside though, this song is always a super tough listen to. It's just full of emotion. It touches on loss, but also kind of focusing on the good one brought to life, you know. It's like you, especially, you know, you hear Chester say, you know, it's like, when my time comes, forget all the things that I've done. You know, it's like, it's just a very emotional track. And, you know, especially when he passed, I'll never forget just like listening to those lyrics and kind of changing the words around to like be a message to him after his passing, you know. But moving forward though, we shift right back to All Energy with Bleed It Out. One of Mike's best performances for sure. Love the energy of this one a lot. We again get a sudden shift though as we shift towards Shadow of the Day. Personally, I think it's one of Linkin Park's most underrated songs, you know. It's more somber, but I always love listening to it. You know, you get Chester sort of sounding more mellow, but then, you know, there's hints of emotion that you pick up in his voice. I also like looking into the song and interpreting it in different ways. Like, I remember one time when I was really looking into it and breaking it down, I sort of like saw some parts as being like interpreted as someone who's like at the end of their life, kind of coming to terms with everything. We then get a transition into What I've Done, as many know it, the Transformers song, a legendary song that I think is underrated in terms of meaning. A song that when you really listen to it, it has this like great message of starting anew and wanting to right the wrongs of one's past. Hands Held High is a very different track lyrically, but a welcome one. Mike talks about the many tragedies of life, such as corruption. We try to hold out hope, but it seems that those of us lower on the totem not only suffer the most, but are also, most made to feel guilty or responsible for such problems, while the true culprits are left unpunished and unchecked. No More Sorrow reminded me very much of AFI in a way. I think it was mainly due to the drumming and singing style that they present on this one. Valentine's Day again brings things back to a bit of a slower pace. One of the things I always enjoy about this song though is the build up. You get like almost a full 2-minute 15-second build up to like the drop, and it just hits every time. In Between is a song that I'm kind of torn on. On one hand, I enjoy the lyrics and meaning, but on the other hand, I don't think I'm the biggest fan of the execution. On the contrary, I'm a big fan of In Pieces. I was intrigued to learn that Rick Rubin not only helped produce this track, but I later learned he worked on a couple of Linkin Park albums. It really gives this one a different feel from other Linkin Park tracks. It's more than just an instrumental though. It's like Chester's approach is very different as well. Again, I'm not really, super knowledgeable like others in music, but there's just something different, and then that guitar riff that is used later on, so good. The Little Things You Give Away closes the album. It's a good closer, a sort of dramatic, slower close. Personally, I think I didn't give this album as much credit as it deserved. A Thousand Suns is Linkin Park's fourth record, released in 2010, coming in at 15 songs, 48 minutes. Before we get into this, let me just provide the quick context of that. My father and I, we've been big fans of Linkin Park, but as they started, releasing more albums later on, especially because these were during the times before streaming services, it was hard to keep up, especially, money wise to buy the records. And, from there, it just came a thing of like, we started only really picking out the songs, like after, I know it seems like such a common like Linkin Park, sort of like fan take, but like after Meteora was like, or really after Minutes to Midnight, but Minutes to Midnight was really the first album that we started like, we only listened to a select few rather than the albums as a whole, like we started getting bits and pieces, and it was a mix of things, but it was mainly just overall like, I don't know, like it really became a thing of like we were only like listening to like bits and pieces and never the full albums, but I just wanted to get that out the way because a lot of these albums are actually going to be like my first time hearing them in full. Because for example, with A Thousand Suns, there's a couple of songs that I've heard off this record before, but there's a couple that's like I never heard them in full. So I just wanted to get that out the way for the next couple of albums coming up, and you'll hear me expand on that more. But off the bat, you get the combined intro of the Requiem and the Radiance. And it's very much giving me Starset vibes. I know Starset obviously came years later after Linkin Park in this record, but like that's what I'm comparing it to now because again, this is my first time hearing a lot of the different stuff on this record, and it mainly gives me that Starset vibes because it has like that sort of like sci-fi feel that they incorporate. Burning in the Skies, classic song from this record. This is one of the ones that I've heard. I really enjoyed Mike singing on this one. Once again, you get this really sort of passionate performance here from Chester, and it's just one of the things I love, whether it's Mike or Chester, you just sort of feel that emotion in their voice, and the music is coming from the heart. And of course, Brad, Rob, Dave, and Joe are all able to masterfully come up with the instrumentals to match the tone, but sometimes the instrumentals themselves are also able to convey that emotion as well. It's real good. When They Come For Me is another song like hands held high with a very passionate approach to addressing some of the hate and criticisms Linkin Park were getting for changing their sound. Mike even says, "I'm not the fortune and the fame, nor the person telling you to forfeit the game." Later on, he also has a line about describing a blueprint as a curse. Essentially, while their first two records were smash hits, they shouldn't use them as the blueprint for every album, because they'll later just be subjected to just making the same music over and over again. Essentially, they want the fans to trust in the change because it's the way they can stay innovative and fresh. And personally, while I wished for more music like Hybrid Theory, it's not like we didn't get songs of that type of sound. Like there's still songs scattered throughout that still have that sort of sound. But again, it's also what keeps that record fresh, like how I described it. You know, it always sounds fresh because they didn't give into the formula and just keep pumping out Hybrid Theory light. You know, it's like Hybrid Theory sounds fresh because nothing else really sounds like it. They'll give you a song or two that sounds like it, but the album as a whole is fresh because they chose to just keep, you know, changing and experimenting. And that's one thing I've always sort of loved about Linkin Park. You know, even if it didn't always hit with me all the time, I will always have love for artists who are just so willing to experiment and, you know, go out of their way, you know. But moving forward, Robot Boy was a very dramatic song, a common theme on this record so far. It's very somber and slow, kind of like Starset's music. I just can't help but think cinematically, you know, like as if Linkin Park approached this with a sort of like specific type of scene or setting in mind as they created it. Afterwards, we get to Waiting for the End, another song that is, you know, like Pushing Me Away and Somewhere I Belong. It's just a song that I hold very, you know, close and dear to my heart. It's a song that was constantly on loop during some of the lowest moments of my life, but that is sort of the message I want people to take away when it comes to Linkin Park's music. It may sound and be very emotional at times. It may come off as people describe as depressing and emo, but, you know, again, it's like I listened to them so often, yes, when I was down and feeling hopeless and feeling like I was coming up on the end of the road. I mean, I would listen and just always feel it in my heart whenever Chester would say, all I want to do is change this life for something new. But by the end, I was always left full of hope and impassioned, especially due to that last part. Chester in the final, you know, like minute or so of the song just sings with such passion and emotion, but it's the lyric, I'm holding on to what I haven't got. Chester explained that to him, it was like in relation to dreams, how even though dreams haven't been accomplished, you still hold out for when they can be realized, and, you know, they help people to continue living and move on. For me, that line always represented the hope in me. And in a way that probably doesn't make sense, I was holding on to the hope I didn't have. I didn't have hope that things would get better, but I knew that I needed to keep pushing for the eventual day that things did get better. Linkin Park as a whole has just always found a way to make music like this. One that affirmed you and let it be known that you are seen, you are heard, and that you're not alone feeling this way, but also providing comfort and hope by the end of the song. Moving forward, Blackout was such an interesting track due to the production. Once again, Rick Rubin is part of the production, but what makes this one interesting to me is sort of that contrast between Chester's rage and the overall production. They don't really match, and yet it still feels like they still work together. We also then get Mike closing the song a bit more somberly. Wretches and Kings goes absolutely hard. Mike's rapping paired with Chester on the chorus was great. Pair this with heavy guitars, drums, and Han on the turntables, and it makes an absolutely powerful song about rebellion. Iridescent is a slower song. You know, it isn't as sudden as a shift, because this record has various sort of interludes with various different like speeches on it. This one though is more of like a ballad in a way. It's, you know, again about having hope. Throughout this record, Linkin Park has kind of been touching on, you know, the problems of the world and how, you know, they can contribute to some of the various emotions we feel. But this song is kind of about having hope and using all the other emotions that we have to, you know, rise above all the chaos. The Catalyst is a song that is likely what you'd imagine based on its title. Continuing the theme throughout the record, we see an anthem about living in a hopeless situation. A situation where everybody feels under control and that there's no hope for change. The Messenger though sort of closes this record as a contrast to that thought. It's more hopeful and uplifting. It was also heartbreaking to learn that he wrote this song for his kids. Chester, of course, he wrote this song for his kids to sort of let them know, you know, that things are going to get tougher, but he will always love them. Living Things would come 2 years later, coming in at 12 songs, 37 minutes. I really enjoyed Lost in the Echo, especially because of all the various elements in it. You have, you know, a sort of electronic feel to it, but it still has rock elements in it. It's not like you especially lose Chester's vocal power either, as he still showcases it in the latter half of this song. While they leave it up for interpretation like a lot of their music, I liked Mike's take on the song Burn It Down. As he puts it, he sometimes views it as a take on celebrity culture and how quick people are to uplift and then tear somebody down. Also, just gotta mention, I love the synths on this one. While I enjoy the meaning behind it, the execution of lies, greed, misery wasn't my favorite. Both the flow of Mike and the style that Chester used just kind of don't stick with me. It's a bit of an odd song. Remember how earlier I said that despite changing their sound for, more creative ventures, it didn't mean Linkin Park would stop their previous style. We see that play out exactly on Victimize. It is very short, but it is just all that pure anger-fueled rock. Roads Untraveled is again one of my favorites from Linkin Park. It is somber, dramatic, soulful. It is very minimal, and yet it evokes various emotions. It can be sad, it can be like reminiscing on old times, it can be like moving forward, it can be accepting. So many various emotions from this song. When talking about Skin to Bone, can we talk about that beat pattern in the background? It reminds me of, the ending of the Like That beat, funny enough at times. Also, another song from Linkin Park that just kind of reminds me of Starset with the major sci-fi vibes. While I don't have a lot to say about this record, I feel the opposite, and I want you to know that. I absolutely love this record and so many songs from it. Despite it being their venture into the electronic sound, it still felt like Linkin Park to me, and I think many fans exaggerated the sort of change. There is still so much good on this record, and definitely one of my favorite listens so far. The Hunting Party, released in 2014, coming in at 12 songs, 45 minutes, was an interesting record because while researching, I was intrigued to see that this was labeled as Linkin Park's return to a heavier rock-centric sound. And funny enough, I mentioned the thing about, formulas. Mike himself said that when he felt like he was writing this record, he felt like he was doing the same stuff over again, like they were kind of doing the previous two records, more specifically the last one where he said he felt like he was just trying to do more electronic style music. So he's like, let's get back to our roots, but more so pushing out that sort of like emotional sound and bringing in that heavier rock centric sound. Also, while researching, I was interested to learn that they pushed the hell out of Rob for this record. Shout out to him. He did insane throughout this record. I really loved his work on this record, and you see that on just the first track alone. But it was so interesting to learn that they put him through a lot to really get that heavier rock sound. But moving forward, I was interested to hear Page Hamilton for the first time, especially since Linkin Park doesn't have too many features, and I don't know too much about this guy. Funny enough, I feel like he fits seamlessly because I just felt like I didn't notice him, like he fit that much in that I didn't, he didn't have, a vocal style that really clashed. But speaking of features, Rakim with Linkin Park, was very interested to see how this collab was going to go. The song takes, a bit to start. It's almost like a full minute and a half of instrumentals before the song begins. Needless to say, this song goes hard, and Rakim is amazing on this with a very sort of lyrical verse about corporate greed. War was a really high energy and, aggressive track. Really felt reminiscent of the sound of nu metal when it was, the early 2000s. We get another feature, this time with Darren from System of a Down, speaking too fast there. It is instantly recognizable through his guitar work, and in classic, System of a Down fashion, it is a song that is about corruption and, instability in the political landscape of the world. Also, Chester brings those same vibes, even more of his singing, especially at the end of the track. After hearing this, I wish we could have gotten more work between the two parties, man. This was real good. I know my dad's gonna hear this and want to hear this track, because it's an interesting collaboration, and again, like I said, it's instantly recognizable, and it just, it works so well. The drumming on Final Masquerade, for whatever reason, at least the beginning, I don't know what it was, but it reminded me of Sugar We're Going Down. I don't know, it just sounds so similar. This is another one of those songs though that is very dramatic in its tone. I can picture it being used in another like Transformers movie especially. And again, another album where I don't really have a lot of specifics to say, and going song by song, but I really enjoyed my listen. A lot of great work on this album with a sort of, these very different, interesting approaches that I really liked. And again, it's a throwback to the sound of 2000s rock. What's there not to love? Finally, One More Light is Linkin Park's final album, released in 2017, coming in at 10 songs, 35 minutes. We have reached the most difficult listen of Linkin Park's discography. I have not listened to this project since Chester passed away. I've listened to a couple of songs since, but it's always a tough listen, especially when examining some of the lyrics. The one thing to know when heading into this record is that it's very different from previous Linkin Park records, like drastically more different. The album takes a sort of softer, often more pop-like approach in order to put the lyrics at the forefront, as they put it. We see this best with Nobody Can Save Me. Just as the title alludes to, it's about the struggle of finding help. This may be due to, our own personal struggles of being vulnerable and, seeking that help, but also, sometimes it can be simply due to not having sources of aid around. Good Goodbye sees an interesting collab with Pusha T and Stormzy. To this day, I think it's one of their most interesting and unexpected collabs. Remember how I said this album was really difficult to listen to though? Chester admitted that Talking to Myself was written from the perspective of his wife watching him go through the various struggles in his life. I just can't, man. Go listen to this song with that information and just tell me your heart doesn't shatter. Battle Symphony sees Chester sing about personal struggle again. The main struggle of discussion on this one is like one's inner thoughts, again having to fight against the worst thoughts in your mind that will present itself. Invisible sees Mike return with a sort of heartfelt song directed towards his kids. He talks about the struggle of parenting and how it's a two-way street. Kids are going to be difficult and not understand the perspective a parent is coming from, especially when it comes to certain scenarios. However, it's also on the parent to just remain patient and understanding. Heavy sees Linkin Park take a step back to truly analyze their life. Often we are quick to say we're fine and push forward, but sometimes it's best to just take a step back, observe, and really reflect. It allows for peace of mind and allows one to confront issues before they continue to grow. Sorry for Now sees another song from Mike to his kids. We also sort of see the dynamic switch as Mike sings and Chester does a little rap part. This song is meant to be about Mike's life as an artist. He apologizes to his kids for being gone for long periods of time, but in time they'll grow and learn why. They'll learn of his ventures and how it was his work that provided for them and gave them the life they have now. And another thing he also added is that he loves his work, he loves his job, so they'll learn to be happy that he was able to do what he enjoyed and loved doing. However, we now get to the absolute hardest part of this record. Written for their friend who passed away due to cancer, One More Light talks about the impact people have. And often others don't realize the little things until that moment that they're gone. Moments such as an extra seat at the dining room table, the seat that they sit in now being empty. As the chorus puts it, many of us look at ourselves as insignificant in the grand scheme of the world. But we fail to see and realize that, there are those around us that are clearly affected or would be clearly affected by our absence. As Chester beautifully puts it, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't there. The song, of course, took on so many different meanings after its release. The first one was when Chris Cornell passed away and Chester dedicated their Jimmy Kimmel performance of the song to him. But then, of course, it took another meaning when months later Chester himself would pass away. By this point, it's just hard, man. This was one of the hardest days I can remember. I was the first of my family to find out the news, and the first thing I thought of was to call my dad. My dad was the one that showed us Linkin Park, who made sure their music was in our lives from day one. He got to see them live and has been in love with their music since the day he heard them. It was impossible not to cry that day, and it's still hard today. When Lost came out, it was such a tough listen because it was like hearing his voice again for the first time. Like I said, this album is always such a tough listen. I only have 2 songs in my playlist, and even then I find myself skipping One More Light so often because it's just so hard to listen to. Despite Mike and Brad writing most of the album, it's just always so eerie to hear a majority of the songs and think about what Chester was going through towards the end. Linkin Park is, and likely always will be, my favorite band of all time. The other day while listening to Hybrid Theory, I told my dad, will we ever get to hear an album better than Hybrid Theory? Because many albums have come, I've listened to them and absolutely loved them, but never have I ever finished a listen and even thought it was better than Hybrid Theory. The closest an album came was last year with This Is Why by Paramore, and even then that was me thinking it was good enough to replace Riot in my sort of top album rankings. Linkin Park is a band that has so much meaning in my life. Their music has been there for me in the lowest and highest moments of life. The music speaks the words that I am often too afraid to speak at times. But most importantly, their music has brought me so close to my father. Like I said, my father introduced me to Linkin Park, but he also introduced me to so much. My father is the only person I'm not afraid to admit put me onto music. As a kid, he showed me the great music of many artists: Linkin Park, 3 Days Grace, Paramore, Evanescence, System of a Down, Duran Duran, Depeche Mode, so many more. And in return, music has allowed me to build the relationship I have now with my father. As I got more into music, as I began to expand and search endlessly, I just kept finding more and more music, and though he may not enjoy all of it, my father was supportive nonetheless and was always willing to hear what I had to bring to him, whether it was from new artists like The Weeknd, Kid Cudi, artists such as Outkast. Even when I ventured into other genres such as K-pop, he was all ears. Now I have him obsessed with Dreamcatcher and Idol. I mentioned him being the biggest supporter of this channel. Whenever I upload, he's there to call me as soon as he finishes listening and is out of work. He is ready to hear the songs I think he'll like. He's, always there to support. If you ever see a video with 1 view, it's him. I'm thankful every day for the father I have. He is a man who has done everything in his power to provide and be the best dad he can be, and never gets his flowers for pushing through despite his own personal struggles. I often don't feel deserving of the love he and my mother give me. I'm still young, but I just feel like I've done nothing of note and nothing to deserve it, and yet they're always there to support me and uplift me. They don't know what goes on in my life, but I'm thankful to have their support even if I don't seek it often. But enough with the sentiments, especially because you could probably tell from my voice I'm beginning to tear up even more than I have throughout this video and script writing process. Let's wrap this video up by ranking Linkin Park's discography. So, as it stands, my ranking for Linkin Park's discography goes as follows: 1,000 Suns Last, followed by One More Light, Minutes to Midnight, The Hunting Party, Living Things, Meteora, and to no one's surprise, Hybrid Theory at first. To all the members, Chester, Mike, Joe, Brad, Rob, and Dave, thank you for all the amazing music you provided my life with. It is due to each individual effort that made the music I love so perfect. Chester, we miss you every day, and we're just thankful for the tremendous impact you had on many people's lives. And finally, Happy Father's Day, Dad. Thank you for all the amazing work you do in this life. I'm so thankful to be your son.